Welcome to the Faith, Hope, and Payroll podcast, where we talk business, leadership, and payroll from a Christian worldview. Join us as we dive into the real-life decisions that shape the people behind every organization. The world offers darkness. Journey with us as we seek the light of the world. Hey everyone, welcome to the Faith, Hope, and Payroll podcast. I'm joined by Mr. Fran Zanello.
Hello, everybody.
And if you can't tell, you can see us today. This is our first video recording of the Faith, Hope, and Payroll podcast. And Dave, I think I just saw you shove literally some stuff off the back of your desk.
Yes, I forgot that we were doing video today, so I was clearing off the desk. And we were talking about this a little bit, the smoke detectors. So I've had some smoke detectors sitting on my desk for quite a while. And you asked me how long, off air, I guess, and I realized it's been a long time. You weren't necessarily prepared for this story, Eric, but when I was putting them up in the house originally, my mother-in-law was still alive. So she's passed away quite a few years ago. And her mind was going a little bit at the end, and she was very confused about the smoke detectors, and she called one of them, she named a smoke detector Attila the Hun. So it's a kind of a running joke in our family, you know, the smoke detector Attila the Hun. So, but yeah, you made me realize it's been a long time. I need to put up the rest.
Just to clarify, those have been sitting on his desk, it sounds like, for over 5 years.
Yes, yeah. And I think they have 10-year, I think they have 10-year batteries. So
they do,
we're good.
You're only halfway through. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. So today's episode, other than smoke detectors, and I had to clean my desk off a little bit, too, I'm not going to lie, we're going to go with payroll oops. So these are stories that Dave and I have accumulated over the few years we've each been in payroll. And we thought it would be entertaining, interesting, and, you know, potentially a warning for how you might be setting up payroll or running payroll today. So, Dave, you sent me a few of these to read ahead of time.
Yeah.
Really interesting stories. I've heard some of them myself with my own interactions. Why don't you get us kicked off with the first one on your list?
Well, I might have switched my list around a little bit.
Oh,
but
okay.
I think so here's where I want to start. And like you said, this might be a cautionary tale in some sense. And I think there might be a few things that I might talk about that might be Mythbusters as well.
Oh.
But what I want to start with is one you and I talk about, I don't know, it feels like almost once a week, is payroll fraud. And when people think of payroll fraud, rightfully so, they probably think of somebody getting a hold of payroll and running like a fraudulent check or paying somebody too much, things like that, or diverting some money, you know, somebody on the inside taking some money. But what I see very frequently is people trying to run a whole fraudulent payroll, so a fake business, and sometimes it's not even a fake business. It's somebody who's posing as a real business.
Impersonating.
They're impersonating. They've stolen information. So I see this all the time, and since I've seen it for so many years, there's a lot of common red flags. But the story I want to tell today starts with a big fraud case, and then later I kind of unpacked some of the red flags. But I worked for a larger payroll company, high volume of payrolls coming in, sales reps eager to hit quota, right? And so if you get somebody who says they're ready to go with payroll, you know, you might just think you're an awesome salesperson, first of all, and you just kind of plow ahead with it. So sometimes some red flags get missed. So we had a payroll process with us, and I think it processed more than once before we actually caught on to what was going on.
More than once.
And
wow.
So what this company did was they processed payroll with us, ran direct deposit to, you know, a handful of employees. And then we found out later, the way payroll timing works sometimes is that they had NSF'd. So we had deposited to employees and found out the money we tried to pull from them wasn't really there. But timing-wise, that you might not find out until the next week. You know, the transaction you processed on the previous Friday didn't have the funds to cover it. So they got us to the tune of $200,000.
Wow.
And so, you know, once you discover the NSF, they've already taken the money from the fake employee accounts. They've put it elsewhere, so you can't pull it back. And so that was quite a big to do. I'd seen this happen over the course of years, but this was 200,000. And I think at the same time, we had another smaller one hit us too. And I mean, it caused a lot of havoc, and it caused like our compliance team to crack down on certain things. But so the way this played out was I found out it happened, talked to the sales rep, started digging in with them like, well, who is this client? Like, let's get a hold of them. Maybe this is an innocent thing. Maybe it's an NSF. But as I started digging in, one of the first things I realized is they had a Google Voice number. So when I tried to call the client and find out what's going on, like, could we get to the bottom of this? I got the automated message that the Google subscriber, is not available, or whatever, please leave a message or let them know who you are. And it's like, like I knew, red flag, Google Voice, like, and not that that's not a legitimate way to have a phone number, but that is one of the red flags, right? It's like they could just pop up phone numbers like that. Couple of other things. In this case, they weren't referred to us by anybody, which in that organization that was high, most of our payrolls came through referrals, right? And so it was extremely unusual for somebody to just find us off the street if they weren't referred in by somebody. So another red flag there. But other red flags you'll see is they typically are a business new to payroll, but not new to having employees. So they'll say, oh, I was paying them under the table, right? And now I want to get legitimate. And so when again, that's something that might really happen. But when you start compounding that with all the other red flags, and then there's a lot of times, for whatever reason, they're out of Florida. I think it's easy to pop up a business in Florida. I do think it's easy to just, register a business maybe with no repercussions and, other filings that need to be done. A lot of times they're cabinet makers for some reason. But anyway, this one, I went through the list when I was trying to call this client, and I was like, oh, it's got all the red flags. So yeah, those things happen. And I see that once a week here, right? I'll tell you, we get leads into our website, and it's often somebody, very ready to go. And you might know this, Eric, but I like to toy with fraudsters sometimes. And a lot of times I know it's a waste of my time. And so a lot of times I just dismiss them and move on. But sometimes I like to toy with them, and I've done ridiculous things where, like, I'll triple our price, they'll say, well, what's it going to cost? And I'll throw out a ridiculous price and be like, okay. And when they say, okay, then I say, well, and I need a $500 deposit before I can send you any paperwork if you really want to get started. And then I've increased that to $550 or $600, and then I've dragged it out over like weeks and said, sorry, we were busy and we forgot to do your payroll. And, when I'm sure it's a fraudster, right? And they'll just keep playing along. If they're a fraudster, they're just very eager to hopefully get you. And so the organization I was in had some compliance and risk pieces in place, but their hope is that those fall apart, and they did. So it's starting with the sales rep who didn't notice some signs and figured, well, I'm going to move ahead. Compliance will pick it up. This person must have had enough fraudulent information to make it look like through our compliance process they were a real business owner. And then when they got to our onboarding team, I'm sure they gave them a sob story about, oh, I have to have direct deposit on this first run, which wouldn't have been our policy for a business like this. But somebody bent the rules because, I'm at a distance from my employees. I can't get them checks. Is there any way you can bend this rule? They did. That's the reason why those rules are in place, because of these things. And Eric, maybe it'll come up in some of your stories, but I think there's a lot of times in payroll, whether it's like you get burned by fraud or something else, when you make those exceptions and you think, I'll do it just this time.
Just this once.
It almost always burns you, whether it's like, just doing somebody a favor or doing something that's a little risky. Too many times you regret it afterwards.
It reminds me of sin, too. You start with a venial sin, just a little white lie or something, and then it gets bigger, bigger, bigger. Then it becomes a mortal sin, and then you're going to hell all of a sudden. Same thing. Sometimes I think I tell these fraudsters that they need to get their life in order too, and turn their lives over to Jesus out at the same time. So I have lots of fun fraud stories, but that was one of the biggest that sticks out to me, and just a cautionary tale. That there are people out there, they are doing this. I actually feel like I talk to the same person over and over when I get these, Eric, because I hear the same background noise, the same thing, same accent, and I'm like, they're just call centers just doing this. So they must get through often enough that it's worth it to them. I will say, though, you're very diligent. You call every single one of them, and it turns out to be the same guy most of the time.
And they're different stories, too. Sometimes they are posing as a real business, and you could just call that business and they'll say, yep, we've been getting these calls. Somebody's using our information. Other times, like I said, they've popped up their own little business. They've registered some business so it looks legit, but it's not.
Yeah. I've got one related story. This happened to one of our clients. So we require two-factor authentication in all of our systems. All of our employees require two-factor authentication for all of even our ancillary systems, not even just the core payroll software, but every software requires two-factor. Just to clarify for those that don't know what that means, you might enter a username password. That's one form of authentication. A second form would be getting a code via a text message or an email or a phone call, something like that. They've also got apps out there now for some software so you can get the code. 8 years ago or so, we started requiring two-factor on everything. Our core system had it longer than that, but we started requiring it on everything, including our email, about 8 years ago. We had a client 2 years ago. It was only 2 years ago, so it's relatively fresh. We had two-factor turned on for everything. We were covered, we thought. Our clients were covered because they had to do two-factor into our system. Problem was, the client forgot to do two-factor on their email server. So they clicked the link, apparently based on the story I was told by their internal IT department. Our client had clicked a link in an email. There was some sort of ghosting system where they were capturing passwords and usernames based on your keyboard strikes. I don't know how they managed to do this. They actually logged in to our system. They used a two-factor code to go to the client's email to verify their identity. Their email had been compromised. They were able to get access to our system by resetting the password to the email. They had access to the email for their two-factor. They went into our payroll system. I kid you not. They changed the direct deposits for 4 legitimate employees to fraudulent bank accounts. They created 2 new payroll runs. They actually submitted one of those runs for us to process. Now, they did this in the middle of the night, and this was considered an off-cycle payroll. Their CSR and our team noticed that there was an extra payroll with fairly high amounts for these employees, which are not common. It was over 100,000. I believe it was 109,000 is what it worked out to be. So we called the client and we said, hey, just to verify the payroll in here is correct because it's for tomorrow, and we need to get it processed this morning to make sure it goes through okay. And she's like, what payroll? Well, we start looking through it. The IP address was overseas when we started looking at the audit trail for the system, and we looked at the two-factor. It was an email two-factor. So then we asked, was your email compromised? They got their IT department in. Lo and behold, their email had gotten compromised, and there was a virus or whatever on the person's computer. Super scary. They were smart enough to get into the computer via email. They were smart enough to realize that they had access to payroll. They went into the payroll system. They figured out how to change direct deposit information, create a new payroll, and run the new payroll. The only reason it was caught, initially, I'm sure the client would have caught it once they got the automated reports, but the only reason it was caught was the employee's like, this doesn't look right because it's an off cycle that I didn't know about. And normally clients communicate. Super scary. It was over 109,000. I don't know.
That's pretty sophisticated, those layers there. Because I've seen things like that, but I've seen where somebody's accessed the payroll system, but it was without two-factor. I've seen where people, I used to think this was silly, and I remember kind of maybe getting into it with the director of operations because we often wouldn't execute on payroll changes via email requests.
Yeah.
And you'd say, well, somebody could hack an email. And so the policy changed over time. Like if you knew you had been speaking to the person, they said, I'm going to send you a request. Okay, that's one thing if you've got that trail. But yeah, I've seen people that it is true. People hack emails and send in a request through that. But the layers they went through there is pretty sophisticated. So
I'd never seen it before that time. I haven't seen it since.
Hey, shout out to Workforce Pay Hub, though, right, for catching that. Because I've seen it where that stuff doesn't get caught, right?
I believe, and Courtney can correct me, I actually think it was Courtney from our team that is the one that caught it. Now, maybe I'm giving wrong credit, but I could have swore it was her. So, could have been Samantha, too, I guess. Courtney or Samantha. I think it was one of them. I thought it was Courtney, though.
Yeah, it was,
Doesn't matter.
Let's give her credit.
Let's give her credit, and then if it was Samantha, she can let me know, and we can do an addendum maybe.
Okay.
Okay. You've got a couple. So that was actually, so your story was actually your second on my list that I'm seeing here.
Okay, so maybe I'll go back to what was my, I think was my first. Was I talking about household payrolls?
You were.
Yeah. So when I started in payroll many years ago, when I started in payroll sales, I remember hearing about these household payrolls, but for whatever reason, as an organization, we said we don't do household payrolls the way people request them a lot. We'll just do do them as a regular 941 filer.
Sure.
And I never knew why. I didn't know what it meant. That's what I would tell people, right?
Sure.
And so I actually remember one day I was covering for one of my buddies who was out, so I was handling some of his accounts, and his accountant reached out. I think it's relevant because I like this guy and I wanted to make sure his accounts were taken care of, right? So I probably went above and beyond in this, and this accountant said, I'd like you to run a household payroll for this. I told her what we'd do, and this was an email exchange. And she's like, no, this is what you're going to do. And she kind of schooled me on how household payrolls are handled.
Sure.
And at that point, she laid it out really well, and I kind of understood what she was looking, like how the federal taxes were calculated, but not withheld or paid. And, those would be paid with the Schedule H. And so I went to our head of compliance at the time. We might not have actually had a head of compliance at the time, but I went to a gentleman who kind of headed things up and explained what they were looking for. And this lady's very adamant. She seems to know. And he kind of said to me, well, yeah, we can do it, but here's why we don't, is because we've actually had clients who have been burned, not really realize, they say they want a Schedule H, right? And they don't know what they say they want a household payroll. They don't know what that entails. And then you find people don't actually make their tax deposits. They think we did. Blah, blah, blah. I guess we had been burned by it before, but this woman seemed to know, he knew who she was. She seemed to have her act together. He's like, if the accountant is really on top of this, then I'm not worried. We'll do it. And that suddenly opened us up back to doing regular household payrolls or Schedule H payrolls.
Sure.
So we said yes to them moving forward. After that conversation, the next time somebody had one, I said, well, Dave got one through. And, so we started doing those and being more diligent. I mean, we went both ways, right? Now that I understood, I would explain to, a prospect or a client, well, these are the two options and here's why you might do one over the other. And you really should be talking with your accountant. But years later, when I was a sales manager, I unfortunately had to take a call from a very upset accountant where there was a misunderstanding, and I think the accountant assumed we were doing this as a 941 filer. The client had been insistent that we do it as a Schedule H, and years had gone by, and we had been running their payroll, and they had not been making the tax deposits, and I think they had something to the tune of $40,000 worth of penalties and interest.
Oh, wow.
And so, I mean, really, we had, followed what the client had instructed us to do, right? But because there was, I went back and looked at, did the sales rep do their diligence? But they can only do so much diligence, right? If somebody says, this is what I want and we can do it, they'll do it.
It's almost between the client and their CPA at that point to make sure they communicate appropriately.
It is. And so today, when I hear household payroll, somebody says I have a household payroll, one of my first questions is, was this directed by your accountant? Are you in close communication with them about how this is going to be handled? Because if not, I'd rather you run it as a 941 filer. And there's always the risk there that an accountant's doing your return and thinks they need to make those deposits, so you might be double paying, if they're not picking up on the fact that you actually, were a 941 filer. But that might be better and more easily corrected than penalties and interest piling up over years. So that's one that's kind of a cautionary tale. It's something that, going in, I had been told we had been burned by that before, and then I actually witnessed it and thought, oh, well, that really can add up, and you really got to be careful about this. So something else before I let you go on to a story. Well, no, I'm going to let you go on to a story. I had a Mythbuster in there as well, but I could bring that back up later.
A Mythbuster? No, tell me real quick.
So it is not uncommon when household payrolls come up that people are also trying to use a Social Security number to file the payroll under. That's a very common one. So when I hear household payroll, there's two things that immediately come to mind. Like, are you talking to your accountant? So we know if we're really doing this the right way. And interestingly enough, sometimes when I had those conversations with accountants, they're not even really aware that you can do it as a 941 filer. Or maybe they are, but they're not really thinking. So sometimes when I pull the accountant and they're like, yeah, just do it as a 941 filer. But anyway, I'm finding out, are you, in touch with your accountant about this? And then secondly, do you realize you need to have an EIN? And many of them don't. Many of them think they don't have to, and they'll disagree with you on that. And I've had CPAs, accountants, tax professionals disagree with me on that. And it can get confusing, right? Because you can use a Social Security number as a TIN number. If you're filing a business return, you're actually filing that Schedule H, probably with your Social Security number. So it is a confusing one, but you have to have an employer identification number, EIN, if you have employees. And so I've gone round and round with accountants on that before showing them IRS publications, but it is a fact that you have to have an EIN if you have employees.
So I don't know. So I want to just throw this out real quick. This is our first video. It is also our first podcast without an active live producer. So I'm going to try something real quick, Dave.
Okay.
Because I've actually got the IRS EIN registration page up right now, because I've had this exact same scenario that you're describing. And I want to show our listeners if I'm doing this correctly. Can you see my screen?
I can. Yeah.
You can. I'm on the IRS's website right now. It's irs.gov/apply EIN. And then I've already clicked into the first option. View additional tax types. If you do that, household employer right here is literally an option for this exact scenario. And I've had to argue with CPAs that this is how it needs to be done. This is how it needs to be registered for. I just wanted to point out, you're absolutely right. And IRS even has a way to do it for this exact scenario. And it even gives you the information here on the screen. So,
And I've seen that before as well, but like somebody might only look at the top and not realize the second option. But I've pointed out publications to people where it says, hey, if you have a household employee, here are the steps to getting set up. And it says, it might not say this exactly, but it says essentially step 1, obtain an EIN.
yes.
It's like, that's what I normally say to people, like, well, you have to, right? Like, that's what it says right here.
So I want to piggyback onto that. So household employers, you have to have an EIN if you're going to run payroll. It's not an option. If you have an LLC, generally you already have an EIN. We have a few clients that pay household employers along with their W-2 regular employees as well. And then I presume their accountant just backs out the wages, because you can't deduct household employer wages, taxes, expenses, etc., from the business income. It's a non-deductible expense. So we have a lot of clients that just pay them on the normal payroll. It's cheaper, truthfully. But we also have a handful of clients that pay them as a separate entity. And we generally, all of the ones we're doing, we do the Schedule H option. Not going to lie, it's easier for us. It's a little bit cheaper too. So, but what I wanted to talk about was ITINs next. Because we've had clients that just let me back up real quick. So there are 9-digit numbers assigned to everyone at birth, assuming your parents registered you for one. And I think Dave and I, we were talking about this because you're not sure your parents, was it your parents, your grandparents maybe didn't have one?
So you're so much younger than me that this would have been a non-issue. It occurred to me, though, as I was looking at the history of Social Security numbers and whatnot, because my mother was always, like, very sensitive, as she should be, about giving them out. Go to the store, you're applying for a credit card, they'd ask you for one, and she'd, make a big stink about it. I remember that being a big topic growing up. But what I realized is I think it was the late 80s or early 90s before they were even issued at birth. And don't quote me on this, but it might have been something like in the 40s they started. Maybe it was sooner, but at some point, like, only certain classes of workers were getting them. Then it was opened it up to more people. You're getting them through the post office. It's interesting, something that we take for granted, to look back and see how it actually evolved. And in my lifetime, after my birth, it became more of a standard that these were just issued at the hospital. So it's relatively new because I'm relatively young. So
relatively. I want to notice, I think we made a comment on our first podcast that we had different color hair, and you can actually see Dave's hair this time, and you can see my hair. I am losing it, though. You can't quite tell. I've got a comb over a little bit in the front.
I am too, but I do a good job combing over.
You have a comb over, really? I always thought that was.
No, it's just thinning. I'm kidding, but I'm getting close to having to comb over.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I want to talk. So we've got these social security numbers. Everyone gets assigned them nowadays at birth generally. We do home births. So, we get asked every time, do you want to apply? And I hem haw every time. I don't know, make them do it when they're older. Grid. Yeah, exactly. But I don't know. We did end up doing it for all of the home births. We've had 3 now. So 3 home births. So anyways, I want to talk about, so if you have a social security number, generally you're eligible to work in the U.S. We have folks that come over from overseas or from down south or up north, and they are eligible to live here perhaps for an extended period of time, but they're not necessarily eligible to work here. However, the government still wants you to pay your share of taxes, or for various reasons you need to be able to report. So they issue what's called an ITIN. It looks very similar to a Social Security number. Generally, if you're thinking about it visually, it's 3 digits, a dash, 2 digits, a dash, 4 digits. Mm-hmm. Now, an EIN, which is also 9 digits, starts with 2 digits, dash, 7 digits. So if you see it formulated that way, it's kind of obvious. That's an EIN. That's a social. There's that option for the ITIN. ITIN are for foreign nationals generally that are not eligible to work in the U.S., but they're given a tax number because Big Brother wants all of his money. Mm-hmm. It clearly states, and we have some clients. They're eligible to work. They told us they're in the process of getting their social or whatever the scenario might be. They are not eligible to work, and I want to share my screen again because this is right on the IRS's website.
By the way, I thought the first time you said you were going to see if you could do something on screen, I thought you were going to put like cat ears on me or something. I thought you had a cool
I thought that was Zoom. Can we do that in this? We're using Riverside. If somebody knows on Riverside, if you can. Oh, we do have reactions though.
Oh.
I don't know. That doesn't seem as
well.
Fun.
Maybe we should play around with that.
We should play. Yeah, there we go. But I'm on the IRS website again, irs.gov/10/ITIN, and it says right here, what is an ITIN used for? An ITIN is issued by the IRS for federal tax purposes only. An ITIN doesn't qualify you for Social Security benefits, provide or change immigration status, authorize you to work legally in the U.S., or serve as an identification outside of the federal tax system. So it's a very limited scope of they want you to pay taxes, and otherwise you're not issued a Social Security number, so they will issue a number for the purpose of taxes. So we have to go back and forth with clients about this. Generally, what many clients end up doing, and I'm not naming names so the IRS can't come after me because I don't know who they are. But generally, they won't hire them. That's the easiest, probably most legal thing to do. Or secondary, they'll pay them as a contractor, and then through that contractor, it's kind of on them to pay their own taxes. So that's generally what I see happen. But I just wanted to bring up ITINs. Kind of a big issue in certain industries, like a lot of agricultural industries. I see a lot more ITINs. So, anyways,
that was another one of those Mythbuster things I was thinking of too.
Oh.
It's one of those things that we've had disagreements with people over. It's something I think we thought we had a disagreement over with a colleague of yours, but in the end, I think he said, "No, I don't disagree.
I just do it anyways.
I just do it anyway, right?" And because I think. Says I was trying to read into some of the penalties and repercussions of this, and there are penalties and things out there. You could end up having to pay certain amounts, and maybe really it exposes your business more to the fact that you've got illegal workers, and that could be even bigger penalties.
Sure.
But I've seen people get away with filing W-2s and things with, I don't know if it's zeros or whatever you can do to get through the e-file scheme or do it on paper, but the other thing I was going to say while I'm thinking about it, it's right on E-Verify too. I think if you go to E-Verify, it tells you right there, like you can't use an ITIN. Yeah, I think it says it when you go to plug in a number, it tells you can't use an ITIN, and it says it says right there, if you have an ITIN, they're not eligible to work. But
don't ITINs normally start with a 9, or is that just me making that up?
They do. And so in some payroll systems, and I don't know how ours works, but it won't even let you type it into the Social Security number field because it will error out and say there's a 9 there, that's an ITIN. But I was going someplace with that. Oh, so one repercussion I have seen, and it was almost like a self-imposed repercussion by a former company I worked with, is we would say, okay, if you say this person is really applying for an SSN and this is a timing issue, if the state allowed it, because it really depended on what we could put on a form, like if we could get away with like 9s or 0s on a form and still e-file a pseudo return,
Sure.
we would do it. But not every state, some states you just couldn't. You had to have a valid number there, you can get through. But let's say it was a state you could, we'd make you sign a waiver and say, if we don't get a real SSN by year end, we're going to charge you to rerun all the payroll, treat that person as, amend all the returns, treat that person as a contractor instead.
Yep.
Because we're not going to file a W-2 or any year-end stuff with this, with this ITIN. So we'd never plug the ITIN into the system. We'd plug a generic number if we could get away with it. And so I actually have witnessed people pay significant fees to have everything undone because they never, they never actually
Couldn't get it back in
came
time.
through with a Social Security number. So it might have been them trying to call our bluff and say they'll run with it, but we wouldn't.
Sure.
So
we've got I want to mention this too, just because it applies. We've got, like I said, agricultural industry. I see this significant amount of time. There is what's called an H-2A visa, which is an agricultural visa. Generally, but it's not always, folks are from Mexico. They'll come up here. They can only work in the U.S. for so many months. You as a business can only employ so many H-2A workers throughout the year. It's kind of a very formal arrangement, and it's kind of seamless, but there's sometimes a lag for first-year folks that come to work in ag. They're allowed into the country. The farmers need them. They need them when they need them to start picking or planting or whatever it is they're doing. So we sometimes run, and this sounds bad, we sometimes run a separate spreadsheet for those clients, and we're tracking year-to-date for them what they should have been paid. And the client writes them a manual check for the proposed net amount. And then once we get that social, we put the year-to-date numbers into the next payroll after we get the social. And that kind of helps us not have to worry about going back. Because even like you said, Dave, if they got you the social before the end of the year, you still technically have to go back and amend all of the unemployment returns, because now the ITIN or whatever number was being used is incorrect. And it needs to be updated to the social. Otherwise, that fourth quarter is going to get reported as a new employee, and they're going to owe taxes again. So, I don't know. Just don't do it, folks. Just don't do it.
It's interesting. That's another just hot topic. I've gone back and forth with people on that. Frustrating, but it's out there.
We probably have time for one more topic. Why don't you pick it?
I'm trying to think of a good one. So I've got a few stories. Let me think. So something interesting. Well, we're talking about payroll oopses or nightmares. This is just something that happened to me personally years ago. Been a salesperson for years, and I once realized that I received a bonus. We had bonuses for hitting. I received like $1,000 bonus for hitting a certain sales increment.
Sure.
But they paid it to me 2 months in a row. So I was like, I didn't really hit this increment again. There was a weird timing thing, and they ended up throwing it on the next commission check as well.
Sure.
So I brought it to payroll's attention, but in that case, there were a lot of layers to payroll, right? You had HR, you had a payroll person, you had an outside payroll company, and if I called that payroll company, I was talking to somebody who wasn't even really processing the payroll; they were taking notes. So a lot of room for something to go wrong, right? So I reported it, and then instead of just taking it back from me on the next payroll, I think I don't know if they did it twice in a row, like on the next payroll, if they did it over two payrolls, but they took that $1,000 back from me twice.
Yes.
And then it was a big ordeal trying to get it fixed. I just remember, jumping through hoops and having to talk to different people and re-explain it. And I wished I never told anybody that they overpaid me, because now they've underpaid me and I'm fighting to get that back. I actually think I saw a guy recently who was, the IRS accidentally gave him some money. And then when he reported it, they started charging him interest on the money they gave him.
Because he had cashed the check or whatever?
Yeah. So that's it. But so mine wasn't quite the same, but it was like, I'm being punished here for but it was a good story that I would tell. I had a few own personal payroll issues. It's a good testament to an organization like ours where you're talking directly to the person that handles your payroll, right? Because you're not jumping through those hoops where somebody's like, hey, I'm just the note taker. Tell me what's wrong. And then I'm going to go to the next person, and have them do something. Then it needs to be approved through 5 different levels. And so, when you can work with an organization like us and go straight to the horse's mouth, is that the expression? But anyway, straight from the horse's mouth. But anyway, and you have a direct connection with the person that's processing your payroll, these things are a lot less likely to go wrong. So, yeah. Anyway, that's my story.
I'm going to look this up real quick because it says straight from the horse's mouth, not to, but from.
So it was straight from my mouth. Then I guess the horse was speaking straight to the person who received the leading to water. No, never mind. That's another saying.
A lot of horses. I've got a person. I was a little bit shorter than I thought, so I'm going to throw another one on.
Okay.
So I own the payroll company. So, I have to pay my employees. And I got to be honest, I only run 2 payrolls, mine and one other, my business partner's payroll as well. And so I don't do it nearly as much. Most of our CSRs are running, 50, 60, 70 a week. I'm running like maybe 4 payrolls a month total. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to lie, during our busy season, I sometimes get forgetful, and I actually got forgetful. This was 2 springs ago. We're building a chapel at my house. My family's building a nice sized chapel for about 100 people at my house, and I'm out in Ann Arbor, Michigan, at a Lowe's picking up some wood, and all of a sudden it's like 8:45, somewhere around there. I'm getting back in my car after just loading it up full of wood, and I'm like, crap. I think I forgot to run payroll. It's a Thursday night, and paydate's tomorrow, Friday. I forgot to run payroll. I can't believe I did this. And do I have my laptop on me? I sure don't. And I can't do the back ends. I could have processed payroll on my phone, but I couldn't have actually sent the file to the bank. The bank requires a secure browser, and my phone doesn't qualify. I'm like, crap, what do? I can't get home in time. I'm too far away. I can't get home in time to get it processed. So I do the next logical thing. I call my wife up. We've got to have them on, Dave. I call my wife up. At this point, let's say it's 8:50. The bank cutoff is 9:30, and I don't have time to drive home, get in, get logged in, get it processed, upload it. I just don't have time to get it done in about 40 minutes. So I call my wife, say, I forgot to run payroll. The employees need to get paid tomorrow. I need you to go to my laptop. I'm going to walk you through from memory how to do everything. I don't know why, but I had a God moment. I had all of my passwords memorized, where normally it's just a lot of people, we just save them on our browser. You just click it and it's there. I had them memorized so I could tell her what they were. And she could have probably clicked it, but I don't know why, but I still told her. I walked her through how to run payroll. First time ever running payroll. We got it done in about 10 minutes. I don't know how many employees I had at the time, maybe 10. We got it done. She processed it for me 10 minutes. And she went one step further than even my employees normally have to do. And we actually uploaded it to the bank as well. And I was super impressed with her. But it's like, it reminds me, not to diss on the carpenters, but it's like you've got a carpenter who does beautiful work, like gorgeous work for everyone else. And his house is falling apart because he cares so much about his customers and clients that he never has time for his own house. I sometimes feel that way about my employees because I actually had to have Denny, our HR specialist. I say, Denny, I need you to actually go into our own personal account. I need to redo our onboarding for new employees. I need to make sure our handbook's correct. I could probably figure it out, but I don't do this like you do. So I actually had to have her go in there earlier this year, and she just totally revamped it for me. Big help. But it's literally one of those things, maybe you're good at selling hardware, maybe you're good at building pools, and I don't know.
Well, I've been here for almost 2 years. You told me that about the carpenter, its own house, when I first came on board. I think apologetically, like, hey, knowing that, I think maybe knowing that I came from a payroll background, like, oh, I need to, apologize up front. But that's never been my experience. In fact, when I sell people like on the onboarding side of things,
sure.
I always use my experience as like, hey, here's how seamless it was for me, to get onboarded from my phone.
Sure. Oh, you did it from your phone?
Yeah, well, it's been 2 years now, so I don't remember exactly, but I do a lot from my phone.
You do a lot,
So
okay.
I'm sure I did some of it from my phone, maybe some of it sitting down to the computer because it might be a little easier to type that way. But yeah, it seemed like a very seamless experience to me.
Yep.
So.
Okay. And had I actually been my own client, my CSR, my assigned CSR would have reached out to me the day before, like,
right,
what the heck, dude?
So we wouldn't,
we wouldn't even been there. So
yeah, so I don't know if we're, I know we're going kind of long on time. I had kind of a closing thought.
Oh, go for it.
That kind of goes back to what we were saying in the beginning. Like this, when you make those exceptions, you often regret them.
Sure.
And I've been around payrolls a number of years, and I was a sales manager for a number of years, and I always had sales reps that were trying to get me to like, hey, can we talk to operations about bending this?
Sure.
And when you talk about stories, I almost always could have a story like when you're talking about, well, could we bend this rule? I'd be like, nope, because here's what could happen, right? And so
yes.
I thought maybe that's where your story was going about, like the Thursday night and like, because sometimes it's better, like when things get down to the wire and it seems like a disaster and people want to like pull out some, fly-by-night solution, like, can we do this to solve the problem? I think a lot of times it's usually better to just like say, nope, let's just be very transparent about what's going on. Let's talk to the client. Let's talk about a reasonable solution. And those things usually work out best because when you try and do this desperation solution,
sure.
I often see it just spirals out of control. You think you're like, I'm going to do this desperation move to solve a problem, and then something doesn't go right. You've ended up over-promising, or you can't deliver exactly the way you said. So in my experience, it's best to not. I've used the expression like payroll is not life or death, right? Yes, when somebody's direct deposit gets missed, it's a big deal. That's one of the biggest problems in payroll. But generally, take a breath. Let's talk it through. Let's solve the problem in a reasonable way because that's going to be the best way.
Dave, did you just say my wife was the
desperation
option?
No.
Okay,
I'm just saying when something goes wrong, I've had lots of desperation suggestions thrown out. Your wife is very competent. You had the passwords memorized. That was a reasonable solution.
Oh, okay. Good call. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we are running out of time, but I want to throw out too. So, like in my example, we offer same day payroll now for an added cost. So my absolute option of last resort would have been I would have sent a wire in from my bank in the morning, Friday morning, and then my employees would have gotten paid in the afternoon. So we always have same day payroll as a option, or as I think based on the order, we have early wage access. Perhaps if the employees were using stuff like that, there would have been a method for them to get paid.
So it's the employee's fault. Anyway, they should have been taking their wages early, and you never would have been up against a wall like that. So.
Yeah. Well, they should remind. Normally, they remind me like I haven't seen my pay statement post yet, and I'm normally getting that message. If I do forget, I normally get it from a few of them, anyways. So
yeah,
awesome. Well, I hope you enjoyed the podcast episode today, the Payroll Oops episode, where we had a couple versions of fraud, a couple issues we see with companies processing. We have other stories we could have told as well, and perhaps we'll do a version 2 because there's a couple good ones Dave's got listed here. But I hope you found some value from this episode. Don't hesitate to reach out to us, workforcepayup.com, info@workforcepayup.com. And Dave, what's our closer? I think you had it.
What was it? The official closer or the payroll podcast? You never knew existed, but you can't live without.
That's it right there.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Yeah. There you go. Okay. Thanks, everyone. God bless.
Talk to you. Bye.
Twice the